Have you ever wondered how a country with the world's largest oil reserves could just completely collapse? How did Venezuela, once the wealthiest nation in South America, end up with a shattered economy and millions of its people fleeing? The common narrative points to mismanagement and corruption, and while that's true, it's not the full story. The real reason is something much more fundamental, something that could happen anywhere if we're not careful. Today, we're diving deep into how Venezuela's economy didn't just fail, it was re-engineered to fail. To understand what happened under Nicolas Maduro, we have to first look at the Venezuela he inherited. Long before Maduro, Venezuela's economy was already structurally flawed. It was heavily, and I mean heavily, dependent on oil. When oil prices were high, the country was flush with cash. The government used this oil money to fund massive social programs and subsidize everything from gasoline to groceries. This created a system where the state, not private enterprise, was the main driver of the economy. This is what is often called a rentier state, a state that lives off rents from natural resources rather than taxes from a productive economy. This reliance on oil created a huge vulnerability. The private sector was relatively weak and often crowded out by the state. When oil prices dropped, the entire country felt the pain. So, when Maduro took power in 2013 after Hugo Chávez's death, he wasn't taking over a perfectly healthy system. He was handed the keys to an already fragile, oil-addicted economy. The foundation was shaky, but what he did next wasn't just a misstep. It was a complete demolition of the existing economic logic. Maduro faced a perfect storm, falling oil prices, mounting debt, and a political system that was deeply polarized. But instead of trying to fix the underlying economic problems, like diversifying the economy or boosting private production, he doubled down on something else entirely: political control. He fundamentally changed the incentive structure of the entire country. Think about it this way: in a normal, functioning economy, what is rewarded? Productivity, innovation, efficiency. If you build a better product, provide a better service, or find a more efficient way to do something, you succeed. You create value, and you are compensated for that value. Your reward is based on what you produce. This is the engine of prosperity. Maduro turned this logic on its head. Under his rule, production was no longer the primary path to success. In fact, it often became a liability. Instead, the ultimate reward became proximity to power. Loyalty to the regime became the most valuable currency in Venezuela. Let's break down how this happened. The government began to systematically take over private companies from farms to factories. They implemented strict price controls, which sound good in theory but are disastrous in practice. Imagine you own a bakery. The government says you have to sell bread for a price that is less than what it costs you to make it. What do? You stop making bread. You go out of business. This happened across every sector of the Venezuelan economy. Productive capacity was systematically dismantled, not by accident, but as a direct result of government policy. So, if you couldn't make money by producing things, how could you get ahead? The answer was simple. You had to get on the government's good side. The regime controlled access to everything: foreign currency, import licenses, subsidized food, government contracts. All of it was distributed not based on economic merit, but on political allegiance. A new class of elites emerged, often called the Bolívar. These were individuals who got rich not by building businesses, but by securing favorable deals with the government. For example, the government controlled the official exchange rate, which was artificially low. If you had the right connections, you could get access to cheap dollars from the government, then sell them on the black market for 10, 100, or even 1,000 times the price. You produced nothing. You created no value, but you became fantastically wealthy simply because you were connected to power. This created a vicious cycle. As the productive economy collapsed, the government's control over the remaining resources grew even stronger. And as the government's control grew, the incentive to be loyal rather than productive became even more powerful. The entire economic system shifted from being production-based to being power-based. Think about the military. To ensure their loyalty, Maduro gave generals control over key sectors of the economy, like food distribution and mining. Suddenly, generals were in charge of importing and distributing food. Were they experts in logistics or agriculture? No. They were experts in loyalty. The result was massive inefficiency, corruption, and, tragically, widespread food shortages. The very people put in charge of feeding the nation were the ones profiting from its hunger. This is the core of the Venezuelan tragedy. The economic collapse wasn't a bug in the system, it was the feature. It was the logical, inevitable consequence of a system that stopped rewarding productivity and started rewarding political loyalty. When the main goal is no longer to create wealth but to consolidate power, you don't need a thriving, independent private sector. In fact, a thriving private sector can be a threat. Independent business owners have their own power base. A population that isn't dependent on government handouts is harder to control. So, from the regime's perspective, a weakened, dependent population is actually a strategic advantage. It ensures their survival. The economy wasn't just mismanaged, it was sacrificed at the altar of political power. The goal shifted from generating prosperity for the nation to extracting resources. For the survival of the ruling elite, the result is what we see today. Hyperinflation that made the currency worthless, crumbling infrastructure, empty supermarket shelves, and one of the largest refugee crises in modern history. It's a stark reminder of a universal truth: an economy cannot survive, let alone thrive, when power, not productivity, becomes the ultimate prize, when loyalty is rewarded over competence, and control is valued more than creation. Economic collapse is not a possibility. It's a certainty. The Venezuelan story is a cautionary tale for the entire world. It shows us that the foundations of prosperity are fragile, and they are built on a system that rewards those who create value, not just those who hold power. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis insightful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. It's crucial that we understand these dynamics to prevent such tragedies from happening elsewhere. See you in the next one.
This is Shadow Financial History.